There could be a lot of moving parts when a carrier and a shipper work to get aligned. You got speed, size, coverage, pickup, drop off, logistics, and technology integrations. Well, once you get all that sorted out, the elephant in the room turns to price. And that's exactly what we're here to talk about today on this episode of Better Yet. I'm thrilled to be joined by two Joshes today. We have Josh Taylor, Senior Director of Professional Services over at Shipware. And we have Josh Fredman, Senior Vice President of Growth and Operations over at Better Trucks. So before we dive in to the meat of pricing today and last mile parcel, I'm going to let both these gentlemen introduce themselves. Josh Taylor, let's start with you, please.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on today, Dan. As you said, my name is Josh Taylor. I'm the Senior Director of Professional Services at Shipware, but I started my career at UPS. I spent about 17 years there working a little bit in sales, but mostly in pricing and in revenue management strategy. So coming out of UPS into Shipware, we focus on helping our clients save money, not just through better pricing with the carriers, but also through optimizing their carrier mix, adding in additional carriers and understanding when to use which service. Also, there's a 3PL division that helps shippers find good fulfillment there. But ultimately, I think we're focusing on the pricing side today. So thanks again for having me on. Really excited to be here with Josh.
Josh, it's great to be with you. Dan, great to be with you too. I'm Josh Breadman at Better Trucks. We are a last mile carrier specializing in parcel deliveries. We're based here in Chicago, where I am today. However, we cover about 25 metros in 15 states. We have a completely connected line haul network between the metros that we serve. And so in that regard to our clients, we offer a very similar service to a UPS or FedEx. We have great technology that's all home built. It helps improve transparency, customer communication, and we do it at a speed that is faster than what you'd ordinarily see from a ground service level provider. And so therefore, we're able to provide additional cost savings to shippers. And we think that, we're on to something really special here. So we've been doing it for about 4 years. We've seen significant growth, and there's more coming later this year.
Fabulous. Thank you to you both. All right, let's dive in. Josh Taylor, I'm looking at you. We came into this year, thinking that there would be some excess capacity in last mile parcel, and that would potentially put some price pressure on the industry. What are you seeing here? We're recording this, in midsummer as we head into peak. How has this year panned out versus how maybe we came into the start of the year?
Sure. Yeah, coming into the start of the year, you're right. Everybody knew that volumes were going to be down a little bit, that there was going to be some capacity. What made this year different, though, was the potential for a UPS strike. Now, that was just averted yesterday when the Teamsters and UPS reached a handshake agreement. But that dynamic with UPS not quite, being normal, it led to some interesting pricing interactions overall. So what we saw was FedEx was being kind of aggressive right where we thought they'd be, but UPS was lagging back. So it's just, my anecdotal experience, but, we work with hundreds of shippers, and we didn't see anybody go from FedEx to UPS. Anybody that switched carriers was going in the other direction. So that capacity still remains, but I think that expectation that we start to see some more aggressive rates, some lower overall net rates, higher discounts, those are going to start materializing here in the second half.
Josh F., what's been your experience this year, maybe compared to what you thought heading into 2023?
Yeah, so I think at a high level, we saw some volume changes that we didn't expect. We had thought kind of last year's volume would be kind of the base, and with some of the macroeconomic pressures that we've seen, the increase in interest rates, it seems like customer propensity to purchase has maybe gone down just a tad, and that's created pressure, on the bottom line. And while we have what I would characterize as a very solid customer base. We've also seen that there's been some movements from some other carriers that we've had to react to, and I think we've done that, and we're doing just fine. But I also think that at a high level, shippers are becoming even more price conscious when making decisions about what carriers they're going to use. And for folks like us, that's an area of opportunity to differentiate ourselves, to provide simple pricing, to provide better quality than what they might be seeing with others. And that's been a win for Better Trucks.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
from my angle, from my side, we were hoping to see as many shippers as possible trying out these newer services they weren't familiar with, as they were getting nervous about UPS. Because what Josh said about performing well, being faster, being cheaper, or being easier to understand just from a pricing perspective, it's a great opportunity to win over new clients.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Josh.
and I would just add, I think that we've seen some shift, leading up to the UPS strike. We've had conversations with clients or prospects that we have not had previous interactions with, that reached out to us directly. And so from that standpoint, it was very positive. I do think, at a high level, there was still some desire to not make a change until absolutely necessary amongst some of those shippers that have kind of done things the same way for long periods of time and have had a certain level of comfort with their provider, typically UPS. But I think that's changed, going forward now. I think that we've earned a seat at the table in discussions with some of these shippers. And, I would think that, with whatever happens next year with price increases, I think already some of the damage has been done. And, we can now go to these folks that we've talked with and say, hey, give us a chance. Let's see what we can do. Let's help you save some money. Let's help you increase your quality and improve your transit time. And so, I'm looking forward to next year as in a very opportunistic light.
Awesome. So Josh, you alluded to the big news as we're recording this just yesterday, the handshake agreement between UPS and the Teamsters. If we think back to January, the headlines that we were talking about in this industry too were the largest rate increases ever. Those pretty big numbers. And I was just talking about this last night. It's not like UPS is just going to absorb that margin, right? There's going to be a certain amount that's going to get passed on to the shipper from this agreement. So I guess, how are you thinking about that as you look at, and the details haven't come out yet, but this agreement on the heels of one of the largest price increases already, like, are these sustainable? There aren't a lot of industries today that you just get these large percentage price increases that are well broadcast to the entire market. So where are you seeing these go in the industry?
Well, UPS has known that they're going to be paying the Teamsters more, once this new agreement is implemented. They've known that for a long time. So they've been planning for this, but also they know that when people see numbers like, the union said that this is going to add $30 billion in cost to UPS over the 5-year contract, right? And it's heavily loaded in that first year. So I think part of what they've done here is to start to ramp up to cover some of that cost. Now, when people see that number, they're expecting another big rate increase, and they're right. There's no reason for UPS not to, because people are expecting it and going to be willing to pay it to a certain amount. It really impacts the smaller shippers the most, the ones that don't have any, rate cap protection, things like that. But yeah, everybody's going to be paying more as a result.
I think it's interesting, Josh. The UPS strike threat was obviously top news. FedEx is also in discussions with their pilots union, and the pilots are asking for a hefty price or salary increase, pay increase, just like some of the pilots in the passenger realm have gotten recently. And so I'd be curious for your thoughts, on FedEx in particular, and kind of what this means for FedEx shippers. Is it the same mentality? Is it the same mindset that they're kind of approaching 2024 in?
So they're governed by different laws, the pilots and UPS drivers. But yeah, the FedEx example is really interesting. They haven't had an updated contract for about 2 years. And they reached a handshake agreement. The union leadership did the tentative agreement with FedEx just last month, but then the union members voted it down. It was a 30% increase in pay, 30% increase in retirement. So a pretty good deal. But only a couple of weeks after that handshake agreement, United announced that they got a 42% increase. United Pilots got a 42% increase. So yeah, you see union members trying to flex their muscles a bit. There's not the same strike risk with FedEx pilots as there is with ground drivers, UPS ground drivers. So I don't expect it to actually hurt service, but it's a distraction, at least. And it does kind of pull FedEx into that conversation of, can you guys take care of your employees so we can just get back to shipping packages?
Interesting. So how is that manifested to a client that ships with UPS or FedEx, when these price increases come to fruition? What should a shipper kind of expect to see from a bottom line increase? And, how is that manifested? How is it communicated? What are the line items that they might pull, or what levers might they pull to kind of get that increase in there?
So for this year, 2023, the announced increase was 6.9%. That's, they call it an average, but really nobody has an average of exactly that, or it's very rare to have an average of exactly that. Depending on the characteristics of your packages, you might have significantly higher or maybe even a little bit lower. But on top of that, that doesn't include surcharge increases and things like that. So a lot of shippers end up paying 10%, 11% more year over year. And UPS and FedEx don't explain it. Really, they just give you that average 6.9% and let it go. So it's tough if you're a shipper and you don't have access to good data analytics capabilities. It's really hard to budget for what that increase is going to do to you. That's a big part of the service that we offer. Part of the reason that people come to us is to understand that and then push back against it, try and minimize it.
Josh Taylor, I know one of the kind of arm wrestling happening in the industry now as the multi-carrier movement continues to pick up steam is the idea of kind of the volume commitments from the duopoly versus the potential price savings of a Better Trucks, of a regional carrier, and the back and forth. You might save 30 or 40% on a shipment or a certain percentage of volume going with Better Trucks, but you might lose some of those volume commitments, and trying to figure out, is that a net positive and net negative from a price and all that? How do you advise shippers and directors of transportation to think about that?
So, there's a number of ways. If you're not currently using more than just UPS or FedEx, you're single sourcing and you're just starting out, there's kind of three main ways that you can do it. I mean, the least disruptive is to just start siphoning off all the growth. So, they have no idea how many packages you should be shipping if they got 100% of it. So you just start, pushing some of those away. It's easy, but it also, you don't have a lot to start with, and it takes some time. If you can, sometimes your carrier rep will complain to you being a shipper, will complain to the shipper, hey, we don't like these packages, or, this type of package is expensive for us. So that's kind of the second way. If you can approach it from a collaborative way, hey, your network isn't built for these packages, so I'm going to pull those packages away. That should improve your margin, even though it reduces your volume. And I'll go find another carrier that is interested in taking those. So you got to be sure, if you do that they adjust your commitments appropriately. But it's a way to try and find a win-win, or at least a win and not a loss for the carrier. So the other way is, business realities. Sometimes it's not a choice between what you have today and something worse, because what you have today is going away. So if that's the case, you really need to sit down with your carrier rep, talk them through exactly what's going on and why, and work out the best deal for everybody, right? The reality might be that they're damaging a lot of, one of your SKUs, and you're packaging it correctly, and just for whatever reason, their network is bad for it.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to understand that you can't keep sending broken things to your clients,
Yeah.
so they got to work with you to allow you to pull those away. It's tough, but we've done it quite a few times.
Absolutely. Josh, this is a conversation you are literally having every day with clients as they, look at alternatives and as they look at better trucks. How do you advise shippers to kind of think about this exact thing, whether it be the commitments to the larger carriers versus potentially significant price savings they'll get with a regional carrier?
Yeah, good question, Dan. So I think that one of the things that is really important from a shipper perspective is to know kind of your sweet spot and know where where most of your volume is and where it's going. And so how can you focus on finding the best alternative or the best cost or the best transit time? Every shipper is different to meet those needs. And so if you know that you have a distribution center in the center part of the country and 40% of your volume is going within 300 miles of that distribution center, how can you kind of micro plan and micro target using a Better Trucks or a regional type carrier, and kind of leave other items that might be on the outskirts to the national carriers. So a lot of that has to do with kind of knowing your product, knowing your service targets, and knowing kind of what your clients need from a transit time, and then planning backwards to figure out where there's the most opportunity to save costs.
That reminds me of, when Amazon changed so that you couldn't be just a regional seller anymore. You had to offer 1 and 2 day transit across the country. I think that's a really easy illustration of that idea, right? If you're working with your carrier, you're just all with UPS or all with FedEx right now. You can't afford to hit the whole country in 1 or 2 days, right? And they might not give you discounts on those premium services that would help you get there. But if you work with somebody like Better Trucks, who has better time in transit, you might be able to, hit those destinations in a day or two that UPS or FedEx might take 3 or 4. So when you're talking to your carrier and you're letting them know, hey, you guys can't give me the rates that I need, I'm not going to sell product online because it's a rate shop environment there unless I have these rates. So help me pull those away, allow me to pull those away, put them in a different network, and adjust my commitments accordingly.
Awesome. Love it. I'm going to shift gears to a topic that I know is near and dear to both your hearts, and that's dynamic pricing or algorithmic pricing. So I know Josh F. Better Trucks is, at its heart, a technology company. Everything you do from first to last scan is driven on a technology stack that you've homegrown over the last 4 years. So let's talk about this a little bit. It's a notion that is permeating society more and more every day. The idea of algorithmic pricing, for instance, ride sharing apps introduce a lot of people to this idea of surge pricing. So Josh Taylor, kick us off. Kind of give us a sense for how pervasive dynamic pricing is in the industry versus, just the static rate card that so many are still asking for.
Yeah, for years, FedEx has had a program called the Great Rates Program, and it's only for international packages, but it allows small shippers to call in and get like a spot quote to fill up empty space within their planes. And when there is that empty space, it is really hard to beat that rate. So that's kind of the beginning of the carriers introducing dynamic pricing. As capacity went down, the prices went up. There's a very clear correlation between it. If you listen to their earnings calls, they'll talk about things like the new UPS Deal Manager. They'll call that dynamic pricing. It's not what most people would think of as dynamic pricing. It doesn't change over time. It just it reacts to the current situation and provides a discount based on what it thinks is required to win. So I wouldn't really consider that to be very dynamic.
Yeah.
But the other thing they've talked about, said that they're piloting, is systematic day of week pricing. And this is where I think you start getting some real dynamic pricing happening with the carriers. And the idea here is that on days that are busier, they'll charge you more, and on days that are slower, they might save you a little money. My fear is that if you charge enough on the busy days, then you don't actually have to offer additional discounts to get people to shift their packages to those lower days or slower days. So the carrier just ends up with a more efficient network, therefore lower costs, and charging their customers more. Has a possibility to become a very one-sided thing if the carrier, wants it to be. I think there's a lot of opportunity to do it the right way, do it in a collaborative way. And that's part of why I'm excited to talk to Josh and Better Trucks today.
Yeah, so I think, Josh, that's really interesting. I think that we at Better Trucks look at dynamic pricing in a couple of different facets. Primarily from a discounting standpoint, if we're able to achieve additional efficiencies and better optimization, better density, then we want to share that savings with our clients because we've become more efficient. And so why not pass that along? We think that that's just core to our philosophy. I think that's really important. I think that there's also an aspect to dynamic pricing that can drive reliability through a network. And so I look at that in two different ways. The first is if we are, if we have line hauls that are not optimally full, kind of like your plane example with FedEx, what can we do to kind of offset some of that cost? And so we can do that if we can offer a cheaper price and take that package on and stack our trucks. That's a win-win for everybody. It's a win-win for everybody's pocketbook. It's a good thing for the environment. It's just a good thing that I'd love to see others doing as well. Secondarily, I think that when it does come to busier times, or if there are certain inputs such as bad weather, such as other delays that might happen in a network, if we feel that we're not going to be able to hit that customer promise the way that we're accustomed to, then we shouldn't take on that package. And as a shipper, you shouldn't want to give us that package, assuming that you have other folks that might be able to do that. And so from a gaining a goodwill standpoint and having a better relationship with a client, they want to see you successful. They want to see you perform the way that that you say you're going to and that you're accustomed to. And if you can't do that, they want to find somebody else. And so dynamic pricing, really helps achieve that as well. And so, to your comment earlier, Josh, I think there's several different levers that you can pull in order to achieve a true dynamic pricing, I should say. Some of that is in the form of a bid price exchange. Some of that is in terms of, what costs are you looking to realize savings in? And some of those might be from a base rate standpoint. Some of those might be from a transit time standpoint. Some of those might be, from, some of the line items that you might see from a surcharge standpoint. And I think that, overall, what we're trying to do with dynamic pricing, aside from kind of help our network achieve better efficiencies, is to take this cost savings that we're able to realize and generate and pass it on to our client, because in turn, that's something that their customer wants to see. And especially if you can do it from a timing perspective or from a time and transit standpoint that creates better goodwill or more goodwill, then why not? And so that's kind of how we've designed our form of dynamic pricing. It's constantly changing. It's constantly looking at various inputs. It's constantly looking at supply and demand and capacity throughout the network. And that's something that, to Dan's point, the Ubers of the world do. Ski companies do with lift tickets on occasion. Airlines do it all the time. And so that's kind of what we're focused on, and that's what we've been building at Better Trucks.
Yeah, I love it that it's more than just the real-time implementation of supply and demand, right? It's also you letting your clients know, hey, this is when you're going to get the best service. this is when you're going to get the best value for your money. And that flexibility to go somewhere else is so vital to a shipper's success, right? Dan, you'd asked earlier about the volume or revenue commitments that people make to UPS and FedEx, and that holding that really strictly to that gets in the way of some of that flexibility. I think that's something that the carriers, UPS and FedEx, are going to have to manage if they really want to do this the right way.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's almost, you see this in every industry. The idea of disruptive innovation often does not come from the incumbents. And if you take the cab versus Uber example, I know it's been played out a lot, but I do think it is applicable here. Josh F., you're having these conversations every day with some of the largest, most sophisticated shippers in the world, and often you hear, yeah, that's well and good, but I really just need that rate card so I could do an apples to apples comparison. And so, I guess my question is, what is it going to take if, Josh, if
Yeah, I guess maybe I'll start there, Dan. I think I kind of like to think about what we're trying to build as kind of like the kayak of the airline industry. Like if you're going to ship a package and it's going from Chicago to New York, as an example, you have 12 different options to choose from. And based on different inputs, those prices are all going to be a little bit different. The transit time is going to be a little bit different. There's going to be something that's different about that service offering. And so while we're not, building the actual kayak, if you will, we believe that the inputs that kayak uses and shares with their clients in order to share and show what that pricing looks like is kind of the future of what we should be building in the parcel realm. And so Josh, I don't know what your thoughts there are, but that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, I agree. You talked a little bit about how balancing demand on your assets benefits the carrier, right? If the assets in your network are being utilized roughly the same every day, then it's really easy to forecast, to staff for, and it's very, very efficient. So the carrier hopefully benefits just through improved efficiency, doesn't even have to raise rates in order to see a gain there. And yeah, as this catches on, I hope that more companies follow your lead and make it possible for people to actually look at it and see, okay, what's best for me, what's best for them, and where do I find the best fit?
Awesome. So this is an ongoing series at Better Yet. So we're in early innings. So this is something we're going to continue to talk about as we move forward. Let's talk about peak. So we're sitting here. The next 30, 60 days are critical as both shippers and carriers work to kind of lock in configurations, test out, new carriers and whatnot. So Josh Taylor, give us a little bit of a preview. We've moved past maybe some of the UPS uncertainty that we talked about earlier. What shippers can start to expect, or what you're anticipating from a pricing perspective in this year's peak?
Right. Okay. And this plays in with dynamic pricing as well, right? This is one of the more recent applications of it. The carriers measure your number of shipments that you send out in a given week versus a baseline, and then your rate adjusts accordingly, right? I think shippers can expect those peak surcharges to become more and more expensive with the carriers. So both UPS and FedEx are hurting on volume a bit, and so I do expect them to get more aggressive with discounts, offering better discounts, but they'll make up for that on the back end with large general rate increases and large mid-year rate increases to things like peak surcharges. So I do expect it to probably flow pretty well like the last couple of years. All the major carriers that report their on-time delivery percentages performed exceptionally well. And I think part of that is that shippers have figured out a way to kind of balance out their usage of those networks. They're having earlier sales so that they can start moving those packages earlier, and it's not all built up on Black Friday. So things like that are going to continue to be vitally important.
Awesome.
Yeah, my assessment of peak this year is that quality is going to be the name of the game. And so I think that you'll likely see some shifts from folks that are not performing well to those who are. I think the price from a pricing aspect, yeah, you'll probably see some peak surcharges. I don't, quite know what that looks like at other carriers, but I do think that it's very important that clients and customers get those packages when they say that they're going to arrive. And so if people are not performing, then people might be willing to pay a little bit more to try to make sure they ensure that quality.
Amazing. And I agree. I think that, especially coming off of COVID, as it did force, catalyze the multi-carrier movement. Josh Taylor, it sounds like we've gotten a couple reps the last couple seasons, trying to figure out on the software how we can do that. And as much as anything, it's gaining faith in that, right? The system, when it's kind of go time, you can't afford to have anything go wrong. But as we know, carriers maybe tested a little bit of volume here and there during peak shipping, and then the software is held up and the carriers have held up and the packages have been routed as they need to be. That will maybe embolden folks, if they do see some of those surcharges that they weren't expecting, to have more confidence in tapping that multi-carrier network. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. During that season, you've got such a lot of people have, multiples of their monthly volume going out in November and December. So when you've got a ton of volume like that, it can become pretty easy to, and even very wise to partition off some of that, to pull some of it off and, try it on another carrier. The risk, right, of staying with a single carrier like UPS or FedEx and just hoping that they're going to treat you right the whole way through, they're thinking about their entire network, right? And so they're trying to balance assets, they're trying to keep everything flowing, and that doesn't always translate into what's best for an individual shipper. So as individual shippers, it's a great idea to have relationships with multiple carriers, split that up. Some carriers are better in one part, some carriers only deliver in another part. Figure out what works for you and execute on that.
Hey, Josh, we've talked a little bit about UPS and FedEx. And what's your take on some of the changes at the Postal Service that were enacted earlier in July?
So, it pulled together a couple different services and made it a more coherent service offering. I think the USPS has done a good job over the last couple of years of pulling out unnecessary cost, right? Some packages that were 2 to 3 day and were going on planes really were competing against UPS and FedEx ground nationwide, which is 1 to 5 days. And so that's what this new service does, is it brings it down to a 2 to 5 day service. But there's a lot of benefits there, right? They reduce cost and they pass along some of that savings. And because it doesn't go in the air, you can ship some hazardous materials there. It really does give the UPS or USPS a competitive ground service that looks a lot like the other carriers now. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles. The tracking isn't quite as good, but it's much cheaper.
Options. That's the name of the game these days. Well, this has been fantastic. I think we covered a lot of ground. We've gone deep in a couple different areas. I'm going to get you both out of here on this. We call it Better Yet for a reason. We believe in last mile parcel, that the best is yet to come. So I want both of you, since you're our guest, Josh Taylor, we'll start with you. As you think about the future, be it this year or next year, what is one thing that really excites you about the future of this industry?
So I'm really excited by the number of carriers that we have now that over the past few years have gotten additional investment money and had the opportunity to build out some really impressive networks. And I'm excited as more and more shippers use them and start to create that balance, to start to understand, hey, these are the packages that I give to Better Trucks. Well, these are the packages that I give to somebody else. That's going to improve service and control cost for everybody. I think it's going to be, as more and more people do it, it'll be a real game changer.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah.
Josh F.
Yeah, I was going to go down that road too, Josh. Taylor. One of the things that I think is interesting is for a long time, there's been a need in this industry to be a quote unquote nationwide carrier in order to get in the door with what I would characterize as kind of, high volume shippers. I think that notion is changing a little bit. I think that's, really exciting. And to your point, I think part of it is what you just described with, the carrier diversification efforts that have taken place. I also think that some of the carriers out there, Better Trucks included, are becoming a little bit, or are able to provide service offerings through partnerships that help meet the needs of those clients from a kind of nationwide standpoint. I think you'll continue to see those evolving. You certainly will at Better Trucks. And therefore, it's been able to give folks like us, more of an open door to some of these shippers. And that's been great. And I think that's going to continue. And I think that, especially as we look forward to, early next year, I think you'll see that there'll be, quite a bit of advancement in that realm of the industry. So I'm really excited about it. There are interesting discussions going on that we're having. And, if the national carriers aren't, really concerned yet, I think, in not too distant future, they will be, because there'll be additional options for shippers.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's going to be a fun back half of the year. It's going to be a lot, as always, in this industry happening, changing, evolving, and we'll do our best to stay on top of it. So Josh, thank you very much. It's been just a fabulous episode. We so very much appreciate your perspectives and experiences. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you,
Thanks,
Joe.
Dan. Thanks, Josh.